biggest barrier for people investing in ETFs is a lack of awareness and understanding. 1 in 2 UK retail investors say they have little to no knowledge at all of ETFs. Over 8 in 10 investors that don't hold ETFs lack a solid understanding of them. That's basically people saying, I'm not investing because I don't get it. And that's fair. Well, now's your chance to get it. What's an ETF? It's just a portfolio. That's it. ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. Exchange Traded means the ETF is bought and sold on a stock exchange, just like other shares, such as Shell, BP, Apple, Meta. And fund is simply a pool or collection of investments. Instead of buying a single stock, you buy 1 unit of the fund, and the fund owns a basket of stuff. Now, that basket might be a collection of stocks, collection of bonds, or a mix of assets. And your ETF share represents your slice of that basket. It's important to recognise that an ETF isn't another asset class. It's just a different investment vehicle that holds assets, similar to mutual funds or an investment trust. So how do they work? At the investor level, it's very simple. You buy the ETF shares for your broker, you now own the shares in the fund, and the fund owns the underlying investments. Think of it as owning a slice of a pre-made portfolio. So rather than holding 1 share in one company, you hold 1 share of a diversified set of companies. And diversification matters because it reduces single stock risk. 1 company going bust can blow up your account. But if that same company is in a basket with other stocks, then you wouldn't feel the full effect of that loss. More about that later. All funds have a NAV. This means net asset value. If you add up all the investments held in a fund and deducted the fund's costs and liabilities, this is what you're left with. The NAV is considered the true reflection of what the fund is worth, given the value of all the investments that it holds. Mutual funds and open-ended investment companies are bought and sold at the NAV price at the end of each dealing day. You deal directly with the fund itself when you're buying and selling shares in these vehicles. However, for ETFs, they trade just like stocks on an exchange, meaning you trade with other investors rather than with the fund itself. And seeing as they trade on exchanges, you can trade them at any point during the day rather than taking an unknown price at the end of the day when the NAV is calculated. Premiums, discounts, and why ETF prices can be different. The reason is because an ETF has its own price. That reflects a basket of assets we've discussed. The ETF price is driven by its own supply and demand mechanism, separate from the underlying investments. Think about it for a moment. It could be that some underlying markets are closed when the ETF is trading, and this is true of investing in international shares, or the underlying assets are very illiquid, meaning they don't trade that often, but the ETF does. This is true of bond ETFs. Or you might trade in Lloyd's. Lloyd's is also held in a bank ETF. Remember, this just means a portfolio of bank stocks. And loads of other people are trading the bank ETF, right? If they decide they don't like the look of bank stocks and they start selling the ETF, the price of the ETF will decline. But if other investors are actually buying Lloyd's stock and other similar bank stocks that are held in the ETF, then this is when you can get a pricing discrepancy. Can ETFs trade at a premium or a discount? Yes, just like investment trusts. During the trading day, the market price can be above the NAV, so that means it's trading at a premium, meaning you're paying more for the underlying shares than what they're worth. They can trade below the NAV, or trading at a discount, meaning you're paying less for the underlying shares than what they're worth. And this is perfectly normal with a small mismatch. What matters is why it doesn't become a huge gap or a huge discrepancy in the difference between the ETF price and what the shares are actually worth, the NAV. And this is a part that nobody explains, but it's foundational to ETFs. So what is meant by arbitrage? It means taking advantage of mispriced assets to generate a riskless profit. Now here's a basic idea. If an ETF starts trading above its NAV, meaning each ETF share is worth more than the slice it represents, then a broker can buy the underlying assets in the market, deliver them to the ETF provider in exchange for an ETF share, and then sell those ETF shares at a higher price in the market to investors like you and I. This will eventually reduce the price of the ETF, moving it back in line with the NAV. If an ETF trades below the NAV, meaning each ETF share is worth less than the slice it represents, then a broker can buy the ETF share in the market, deliver it to the ETF provider in exchange for the underlying stocks, and then sell those stocks at a higher price in the market. This will eventually increase the price of the ETF, moving it back in line with the NAV. Arbitrage incentivizes brokers to keep the price of the ETF in line with what it should be worth according to what it holds. This mechanism usually works well, but it's not magic. It doesn't work all the time, especially during stressed markets where the ETF can show bigger discounts and premiums. especially if the underlying assets are harder to trade. The FCA analysed ETF mispricing and documented a case where a liquid ETF had about a 5% discount on the 13th of March 2020 and then a 3.4% premium on the 16th of March 2020, with elevated pricing lingering beyond that period. So this is why prices can differ from NAV. Passive versus active ETFs. Now, before we can understand passive and active investment approaches, we need to understand the stock index. Now, you may have heard of the FTSE 100 and the S&P 500 and maybe some others reported in the news, but what are they exactly? Stock indices attempt to give us an overall gauge of the financial markets with one single number. They track the performance of a specific group of stocks. In the case of the FTSE 100, the index tracks the largest 100 UK public companies. And for the S&P 500, it's the largest 500 US companies. Largest in this sense doesn't mean the most employees or the highest revenue, but what it's worth. And I'm using that term loosely. So it's calculated by multiplying the number of shares that make up the company with its share price. This is called market capitalisation. A company with 1 million shares, priced at £1 a share, is worth more than a company with 1,000 shares, priced at £100 a share. If these two companies were bundled into one index, the first would be worth £1 million and the second 100k. The first company would constitute over 90% of this index. So that's 1 million divided by 1.1 million. Now we can understand passive and active. A passive ETF usually tracks an index, meaning it tries to mirror the performance of the index exactly. So if you invest in an S&P 500 ETF, you expect to get the same returns that are generated by the S&P 500 index. An S&P 500 ETF tries to match the performance of the S&P 500 index by holding the exact same companies in roughly the same weights. This is considered passive investing because you're taking whatever returns the market gives you. Active ETFs exist too. Active means the fund manager uses his or her expertise to try and beat the market. Each active fund will have a benchmark that it's trying to beat. The benchmark can be a familiar index, such as the FTSE 100, or some other barometer. They employ analysts and gain insights into market trends and do deep dives on company fundamentals to take views on the financial markets, hoping to generate better returns than what an index would offer. Same ETF wrapper, but different strategies. Note, these funds are far more expensive as you're paying for so-called expertise. When you take fees into account, not many managers can consistently beat the index. And to be honest, those that do won't be available to retail investors like us. So ETF doesn't automatically mean passive. It's a structure. You still need to check what's inside and how it's traded. Accumulating versus distributing classes. Distributing or income ETFs pay out dividends or interest to you as cash in the form of a distribution. Accumulating ETFs reinvests that income into the fund automatically. So the fund value grows instead of paying cash out. One isn't better than the other. It depends on your tax situation, your goals, and whether you want income now or growth later. Generally speaking, I always pick accumulating as I seek growth. The benefits of ETFs. Low cost, especially for passive index ETFs. Passive ETFs often have lower ongoing charges than many actively managed funds. And cost matters because fees compound as well as interest. So a small annual fee can turn into a huge opportunity cost over decades. If you want to find out more, you should definitely watch my other video on fees before you invest. 2, diversification. This is probably the most important benefit versus buying an individual stock. Instead of betting your future on one company, you can spread your money across hundreds or even thousands of holdings in just one fund. That reduces single company blow-ups, scandals, frauds, bankruptcies, and CEO bunga parties. 3, intraday trading. Because ETFs trade on exchanges, you can buy and sell quickly during the trading day. And that's different from many mutual funds, where you typically transact once per day at the end of the day, and you don't know what price you're going to get. Regulators explicitly highlight intraday trading as a feature, and also it explains why trading prices can deviate from the NAV, as we've discussed. 4, you can now choose active if you want. If you truly want an active approach with the opportunity to beat the market, ETFs now offer that too. You can trade active funds intraday with ETFs, rather than waiting to the end of dealing day for mutual funds. The wrapper isn't just for passive index investing anymore. So the risks, what can go wrong? Well, number 1, market risk. You can lose money. As with all other financial assets, apart from ultra-safe government paper, you can lose money. You have to be comfortable with this fact. An equity ETF can fall a lot. A bond ETF can fall when rates rise. A sector ETF can crater if the sector is out of favour. Again, the ETF is not a safety blanket. It's just a vehicle. Premium and discount risk in stressed markets. We covered this, but it's worth repeating. ETFs can trade away from the NAV intraday. The arbitrage mechanism usually keeps deviations small, but in falling markets, mispricing can get bigger. So if you panic sell, you might lock in an outcome worse than what the holdings were worth. This is why it's important to have a plan and think long term. Number 3, liquidity mismatches. This is the one that gets spicy. Some ETFs trade very liquidly, but the underlying assets that these funds represent might not. Corporate bonds, emerging market instruments, small cap stocks, niche credit, loads of other complicated stuff can become harder to trade in a crisis. So the ETF share price can move quickly while the underlying market is very sluggish or gappy. Number 4, ETF closure. You might be forced to sell your holdings down if the ETF provider shuts down because they deem that their services are too unprofitable. That doesn't mean you lose all your money. Your money is protected using custody accounts, but it can mean your position is sold, which triggers a tax event, and you have to reinvest. This is unlikely and it's rare, so I wouldn't worry. The biggest and most popular ETFs belong to the most reputable providers, e.g. Vanguard, JP Morgan, BlackRock, HSBC, State Street, you name it. Risk 5, tracking difference. Tracking differences are hidden frictions. Even passive ETFs don't always match the index perfectly. Reasons include fees, trading costs, dividend withholding taxes, or even the sampling of stocks in the ETFs. They might not hold exactly the same weights. Number 6, currency risk. If you buy a US equity ETF and you live in the UK, you're exposed to the pound-dollar exchange rate unless it's currency hedged. For example, during Brexit, the stock market dropped, but so did the value of the pound. If you were invested in US assets during that period, the value of those investments in terms of pound sterling would have increased significantly. But the opposite is also true. Your returns can be dominated by FX swings in the short to medium term. If you're holding foreign assets long term, currency risk can be less of an issue. A simple ETF checklist, so you don't buy any nonsense. Before you buy an ETF, ask these things. What's your time horizon? What does the ETF hold? Equities, bonds, commodities? What's the fund's objective? Is it trying to track an index? Is it active stock selection to try and beat the market? Costs. What costs are there? What is the total expense ratio and the platform fees? Distributing or accumulating? You need to decide which class is better for you. If you want growth, go for the accumulation. If you want income, you go for the income or distributing class. Liquidity. Is the underlying market liquid, especially in terms of stress? This is less of an issue if you're holding popular stocks or other assets for the very long term. Reputation of the provider. Is it well known? Are there physical replication of the underlying assets by buying the actual shares or synthetic by using derivatives? If you ask those questions, you're already ahead of most investors who just buy the popular one. That should be enough information for you to decide to jump in or not. Remember, scared money makes no money. So have an investment plan and stick to it. Watch my next video on how to go about buying ETFs. I'll see you later.